It's Monday, the 28th of June, 2021. Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Headlines, the business news you need in just 5 minutes. I'm Sean Aylmer. In today's headlines, the share market is set to fall and economic growth will be hit as the numbers of COVID cases across the country surge. Plus, a strong weekend for home sales despite the lockdowns. Seven Group makes a serious bid for building material company Boral, and Flight Centre introduces a generous way of trying to retain employees. Our lead story today, the surge in new COVID-19 cases is set to take the wind out of the local economy, but coronavirus stocks have already begun surging. 30 new cases were reported in New South Wales yesterday, taking the Bondi cluster to 110. The Northern Territory recorded 4 new cases, triggering an immediate lockdown for several regions, including Darwin. Western Australia imposed some restrictions after a woman who had flown in from New South Wales tested positive. And Queensland, which recorded 2 new cases yesterday, reintroduced the 1 person per 2 square metre rule. Finally, a flight attendant was infectious while working routes involving Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and the Gold Coast. Not surprisingly, there's all sorts of border closures as well. The outbreak has put a question mark over Australia's economic pickup. The 2-week lockdown in Sydney will cost the economy around $2 billion. AMP Chief Economist Shane Aylmer said about 6.6 million people were affected by the New South Wales lockdown, and they account for 25% of Australian GDP. Investors have already begun pricing in the impact of closures. On Friday, the lockdown stocks outperformed. They're the ones that did well last year during all the COVID restrictions. Kogan.com.au was up more than 6%, while Temple & Webster, JB Hi-Fi and Super Retail Group all outperformed. The biggest risk to the economic and share market recoveries has always been another outbreak of COVID. Investors are now very nervous. In overseas news, Johnson & Johnson will pay the state of New York $230 million as part of a settlement in which the drug giant will move out of the opioid business in the US. The opioid industry faces 3,000 lawsuits across the country for its contribution to an epidemic of prescription and street opioid use. Earlier this year, consultant McKinsey & Co. agreed to pay $573 million to settle investigations into its role to help turbocharge opioid sales. Tesla is recalling 285,000 electric vehicles in China because of problems with their cruise control functionality, which could cause cars to speed up suddenly. And former President Donald Trump attended his first rally over the weekend since losing last year's election, and in a 90-minute speech claimed the 2020 election was stolen and wouldn't rule out running in 2024. He attacked the Biden administration and Republicans who didn't support him. He was indeed the same old Donald Trump. Locally, Sydney may have gone into lockdown on Saturday evening, but home buyers were out in force during the afternoon, with the city recording an 82% clearance rate from 1,100 auctions, according to CoreLogic. In Melbourne, the first weekend post-lockdown, 1,400 houses went to auction with a 76% clearance rate. Anecdotally, prices were strong. Markets are now wondering whether regulators will step in to calm the surge in lending. The major banks have unveiled relief packages for businesses and individuals hurt by the COVID shutdowns. It includes loan deferrals and support for customers suffering financial hardship. Individual workers who lose hours could also be eligible for federal government help. One sector who will need help is tourism, with the Transport and Tourism Forum forecasting the Sydney lockdowns will cost the national tourism sector $6.3 billion, including more than $2 billion in New South Wales. The latest news poll in the Australian newspaper shows support for Prime Minister Scott Morrison lifting, and the coalition primary vote unchanged at 41%. Labor's primary vote was higher at 37%, and opposition leader Anthony Albanese's personal approval rating also rose. On a two-party preferred basis, Labor was just ahead, 51 to 49%. The poll was taken after the Prime Minister returned from his G7 trip and after the national leadership spill and 2 state COVID lockdowns. Meanwhile, Barnaby Joyce supporters are the big winners in a cabinet reshuffle. A week after Mr Joyce took over the job of Deputy Prime Minister, supporters Bridget McKenzie and Andrew Gee will join the cabinet. Seven Group has upped its offer for Boral Group by at least 80 cents to $7.30 a share, conditional on Seven getting 29.5% of the company by the end of this week. Seven already owns 24%, and the new offer price is a 12% premium to what Boral was trading at when the initial approach was made. Boral's shares finished at $7.34 on Friday, up more than 6%. The offer will increase to $7.40 if Seven gains 34.5% of the group. Boral is now in play. And Flight Centre has launched an innovative staff retention program. Employees will be granted share rights if they stay at the travel firm till the end of next year. With staff shortages chronic in some industries and other industries like travel and tourism continuing to be buffeted by lockdowns and restrictions, Flight Centre will give a one-off grant of 250 share rights, which will vest in February 2023. It will cost the company around $30 million based on 1.9 million share rights being given out. That's the Fear and Greed business headlines for today. Make sure you hit follow so you get it every morning. And if you'd like more detail and more stories, search for our longer daily podcast called Fear and Greed. We also release a daily interview. Today we're talking about fixed income investments. I'll be back later with the afternoon market report. I'm Sean Aylmer. Have a great day.